where there's something about lies, there's something about love, but most of all, there's something about Mary.
Remember when a summer comedy convinced a whole generation that winning someone back took a private investigator, a fake identity, and one very bad trip to the emergency room? Well, that was There's Something About Mary. Fox dropped it in July of 1998, and the poster made it look like a completely ordinary romantic comedy. Guy, girl, a high school crush that he never got over. Well, it's not that. A dorky prom date turns into a near 20-year obsession. The guy hires a private investigator to track her down, and that one decision unleashes every con artist, stalker, and human disaster currently orbiting her in Miami. Cameron Diaz plays Mary, the woman that every man in this movie is willing to lie, fake an accent, or even fake a disability just to get near. Ben Stiller is Ted, still physically paying for a mistake that he made at 17. Matt Dillon plays Healy, the private investigator who finds Mary and decides that the professional move is keeping her for himself. Lee Evans rounds it out as Tucker, an architect who isn't really an architect, isn't even close, really. Throw in Chris Elliott, Earl Brown, and Lin Shaye, and somehow this ensemble turns stalking into a team sport. And today we're going to count down 15 weird facts about There's Something About Mary. And stick around for number 1. How a 20-year-old magazine interview nearly cost the director an Oscar for a joke that he had been telling on set the whole time. Before we get into it, hit like and subscribe. Don't make us ask twice, and definitely don't make us send Healy after you. Let's get into it. And please, for the love of God, make sure you have your own hair gel. Number 15. Hollywood mocked a British man for sounding too British. Lee Evans plays Tucker, a British architect who turns out to be none of those things. Not British, not an architect, not even named Tucker. He's Norm, an American pizza delivery guy running the most elaborate long con in Miami on a woman who thinks that he's her friend. Now, flip it inside out. The actor under all that fake identity is unmistakably English. Evans grew up on a council estate by the Bristol Docks. Welsh dad, Irish mom, and by 1998, he was one of the biggest comedians in all of Britain, Perrier in hand since 1993. His act was sweat-soaked physical comedy, part mime, part cardio. He would change suits mid-show because of what he would do to the first one. The knock that followed him around ever since was that his accent in this movie is one of the worst fake British accents ever committed to film, which is a spectacular thing to accuse an actual British person of. He wasn't faking. He was just cranking his real voice up, louder and posher, to fit a man who was faking everything else. And the audience decided that, he botched it. The vindication came later. In 2009, he turned up on Doctor Who as a Welsh scientist, and nobody said a word. He retired from stand-up in 2014, already having set the world record for the biggest crowd ever assembled for a solo comedian, 10,000 people. Then he came out of retirement and went back on tour. So scratch the part where he ended up on top. The character lied about being British, but the actor never did. Somehow, Hollywood mixed the two up anyway. Number 14. 3 football legends and 1 bad stage dive. Brett Favre was not the Farrelly's first choice to play Mary's football star ex. He wasn't the second either. He got the part because a Patriots quarterback jumped off a stage in Boston. November 13th, 1997. Drew Bledsoe goes to see Everclear at the Paradise with 2 teammates. And at the end of the set, all 3 of them are taking turns launching into the crowd. A 23-year-old woman named Tamika Messier gets hurt badly enough to need surgery on her neck and spine. She sues. Bledsoe fights it. The papers eat it up, and it takes until 1999 to settle for a reported $1.2 million. Now, the Farrellys, they're New England guys. They wanted Bledsoe. But Bledsoe called them and said no, in the most Boston way imaginable. If this town finds out that I flew to Miami to be in a comedy while all this is going on, they'll run me out of it.
And he called us up, said, I can't come do your movie in Miami because if they find out I'm doing a movie after that, they're going to run me out of town.
Next call is Steve Young. As a Bengal fan, I loathe reading this, but he told them that it was the funniest script that he had ever read and turned it down anyway, because it was rated R and he knew that Mormon kids would sneak in to see him. So they went to option 3. Brett Favre showed up with 3 straight MVPs and a Super Bowl ring. He took one look at the lines that they had written for him, and he threw them out. He just improvised the one about being in town to play the Dolphins. You dumbass. And they kept it. He's in the movie for maybe 90 seconds, and he's the only person in it who behaves like a normal human being. Years later, when the Farrellys finally told this story on the radio, Bledsoe called in. He said missing out on that part was one of the biggest regrets of his life. 14 years in the NFL, a Super Bowl, and the thing that haunts him is a Farrelly Brothers movie. Number 13. The studio fought its own directors over the leading man. Fox did not want Ben Stiller. The Farrellys wanted nobody else. The studio's case wasn't crazy. Stiller had directed 2 movies and appeared in both, and neither one of them made him a star. Nobody had ever asked him to carry a rom-com, because nobody ever thought of him as exactly romantic. So the Farrellys tried to solve the problem and made it dramatically worse. Their counteroffer was Owen Wilson, a guy whose big credential was Bottle Rocket, a movie that had grossed less than $1 million and was still years away from anybody pretending that they had seen it in theaters. His other credit was a bit part in a film that Stiller directed. Again, Fox said that Stiller isn't famous enough, and the Farrellys said, fine, how about somebody that nobody has ever heard of? Jon Stewart even got floated too, still picking himself up after his talk show got canceled. He'd take over The Daily Show a couple months later after the movie opened, which is the closest that anybody in the story comes to good timing. Fox looked at the alternatives, they looked at Stiller, and they quietly gave up. He didn't win the part on merit, he won it because the backups were, at least in their eyes, worse. Number 12, the best kiss in the movie wasn't in the script. 4 hours. That's how long Lin Shaye sat in the makeup chair every single day to become Magda. Because the note from the Farrellys was that she needed to look like an old leather bag. So she's out there under the Miami sun, cooked to a crisp, doing a dialogue scene with a dog in her lap. Peter Farrelly, he's not feeling it. Tells him to pick up the energy. Shaye's fix is to lift the dog up over her head. The dog kissed her. For real. Enthusiastically and at length. Nobody wrote that.
That was classic because that scene, it's just a lot of information, and now it made it great.
Slammer was a female border terrier who had bonded with Shaye. Between takes, she'd look at her trainer and then climb into Shaye's lap anyway. And she picked that exact moment to express it. Shaye's read on the situation was that her job was to stay in the scene. So she stayed in the scene, fully committed, never once acknowledging what was happening to her face. Diaz was watching from off camera and later described it to a magazine as one of the funniest, most disgusting, disturbing things that she had ever seen. Which, in a sentence, that also works as a review of the film. Shaye is the sister of the man who founded New Line Cinema. She's basically in every movie that the Farrellys have ever made. And now, she's the face of the Insidious franchise. Serious horror and real gravity. And she got there by making out with a terrier in a bikini. Number 11, the real accident that they decided to keep. 18 minutes in, the paramedics wheel Ted out of the Jensen house on a stretcher and then drop him face first onto the pavement. Nobody wrote that. They actually dropped Ben Stiller. The take was supposed to be a straightforward, wheel him out. And instead, the crew put a movie star on the ground in front of everybody. They cut, ran over, made sure that he still had a spine, and then looked at each other and realized that it was funnier than anything on the page. So, it stayed in, exactly as it happened. First take, no rehearsal, no notes, no choreography. Meanwhile, the dog next door was getting the full effects treatment. Slammer handled the real work, and at least 6 fake puffies covered everything else. So the movie could throw a dog, bite a dog, and fire a dog out of a second-story window without anybody having to explain themselves to the Humane Society. That's the split screen of this production. 6 prop dogs, a custom prosthetic, weeks of testing, an entire department dedicated to engineering discomfort. And the biggest laugh of the first act cost them 1 bruised Ben Stiller in about 4 seconds. Number 10, One Kid's Worst Day became a comedy classic. The zipper scene is not a writer's room invention. It actually happened in the Farrellys' house. Their sister has a bunch of 8th graders over, they're down in the basement playing records, and one of the boys goes upstairs to use the bathroom. He does not come back. Long enough that it stops being funny. Long enough that their father, an actual doctor, which is the only lucky detail in this whole story, has to go up and knock and ask if the kid's all right in there. He wasn't. Now, here's the part that gets me. Their parents never told Peter and Bobby. Not that year, not in the next one. They sat on it, on purpose, to save the 13-year-old the humiliation. And they hid it from the 2 people in the house least likely to keep it to themselves. It worked for years. Then, it didn't. And a movie that made nearly $400 million opens on the worst thing that ever happened to a kid whose name nobody has ever printed. Somewhere out there is a man in his 50s watching Ben Stiller do his night in front of the entire planet, and he's never once raised his hand. Number 9, the movie's grossest props went through serious R&D. Fox didn't want this scene shot. Not trimmed, not toned down, just no shot. The Farrellys pushed anyway, which meant that somebody on the crew now had a job. You gotta build the substance. You know what substance I'm talking about, right? And the requirements were brutal. It had to read as disgusting in a tight close-up, and it had to be plausible as styling product from across a room. Because the entire joke collapses the second Mary would obviously know. Too runny, no gag. Too thick, no laugh. They put a props expert in, and he kept coming back with versions until one of them worked. Down the hall, a makeup's effects shop was building the other one. The zipper revealed needing a full custom prosthetic, engineered for a single unblinking close-up that the camera holds on far longer than it needs to. That is a thing that exists. Somebody sculpted it, somebody approved it, somebody drove it to set in a case. 2 departments, weeks of work, and a studio actively hoping that they'd fail. And now they're the only 2 things that anyone remembers. Number 8. They shot a clean version in case nobody laughed. Cameron Diaz read the scene, said yes, and meant it. Then, the day came to shoot it, and she showed up different. Somebody had gotten to her. Bobby Farrelly's guess was her manager's, and the note was the obvious one. What are you doing? This could end you. She was 25, she was about to be a movie star, and the plan was to walk into frame with that on her head. The Farrellys didn't argue because they weren't really sure either. Their promise to her was simple. If it doesn't get a huge laugh, it's gone. They weren't trying to gross anybody out, they were just trying to land a joke. And a joke that doesn't land is just a mess in a woman's hair. So they hedged. They shot her hair up, hair down and shiny, and completely normal. A whole clean version of the movie ready to go. Stiller, meanwhile, was worried about something else entirely. Not the content, but the logistics. He couldn't accept that a grown man wouldn't feel that on his own ear. And he said as much to the New York Times out loud, like a man who has thought about that a little too much. The test audience settled it in about 4 seconds. Somewhere in a Fox vault, there's a cut of the film where the biggest joke in it simply doesn't happen. And Cameron Diaz has perfectly normal hair. And nobody has ever quoted a single line of it. Hey, quick pause. Are you team gel or team zipper? Which gag do you think actually aged better? Tell us in the comments. And if you're enjoying this one, hit like and subscribe. It helps YouTube find more people who still flinch during the zipper scene. All right, let's get back to it before Healy shows up and makes this about him. Number 7, the high school is a city hall, and it would like a word. Cumberland High School isn't a high school, and it isn't in Rhode Island. It's in Plantation City Hall in Plantation, Florida, about 1,000 miles south of where the movie says it is. Same tree out front where Jonathan Richman sits and sings the opening, that's still standing. The branch the drummer was on, yeah, that's gone. The city rented the place out for $2,500, and the reviews landed. And the president of the Plantation City Council, a devoutly Catholic man who, to his credit, never actually watched the thing, read enough to work out what he'd signed the town up for. His position was that the council had been misled. And he wasn't entirely wrong. That building is where the town of Plantation holds its Christmas lights display. Wreaths, garland, gingerbread house, the whole thing. Families take photos on that lawn every December, and every one of them is standing in the exact spot where a teenager in braces spotted the girl who would eventually ruin his life. $2,500? No takebacks. Number 6, it beat Saving Private Ryan. At the 1999 MTV Movie Awards, the nominees for Best Movie were Armageddon, Shakespeare in Love, The Truman Show, Saving Private Ryan, and There's Something About Mary. Yeah, you know how this ends. MTV's audience voted, and the Normandy landing, that lost to a movie about a man who gets his genitals caught in a zipper. 4 wins in total. Best Movie, Best Female Performance for Cameron Diaz, who didn't attend and accepted by video message like a woman with something better to do. Best Villain was Matt Dillon, tied with a guy who played a vampire warlord, which is a sentence that tells you everything about what Healy is. And Best Fight. Not Dillon versus Stiller, not Stiller versus Lee Evans. It won for Stiller getting beaten up by Puffy, the same border terrier who had been kissing Lin Shaye a few scenes earlier. It went up against Wesley Snipes cutting his way through a warehouse of vampires in Blade, and Antonio Banderas fencing Catherine Zeta-Jones in The Mask of Zorro. And it beat them both. The award was handed out by Rose McGowan and Jon Stewart, who had come within one studio note of playing Ted. Slammer, for her part, was not in attendance. Nobody sent her a video message either. Number 5, nobody wrote the Chipmunks. Harland Williams is not in the credits of this movie, but he's in it for about 2 minutes, and the reason a generation of men can't hear the number 7 without flinching. He plays the hitchhiker that Ted picks up on the drive south, a man with a business plan and no business having one. 8-minute abs is on every shelf in America, so his idea is to cut a minute off of it. That's the pitch. That's the whole company. Nothing else about him is explained ever. That much was on the page, but then Stiller asks the obvious question. What do you do when someone shows up with 6? And Williams leaves the atmosphere. The chipmunks on the branch, the sunflowers, the children's tale from the sea, the gorgonzola, the brie, the office you get invited into right before you're fired. He estimates that about half the scene came out of his mouth on the day, unscripted, and it doubles the length of what they had planned to shoot. The Farrellys kept every second because that was the whole point of hiring him. Their method was to run the scene as written a few times and then told him to just do whatever he wanted and let the camera roll. They did the same thing for him on Dumb and Dumber. The cough medicine business, also his. So the most quoted minute in this movie was invented on the spot by a guy that the movie never bothered to name. Number 4, he lost the job to Chris Farley, then inherited it. Warren is a real person. Not Farley, but the character. The Farrellys grew up with a guy named Warren on their street, who was intellectually disabled. The older brother of one of their friends. They played street hockey with him, hung around. Just one of the guys. He's in the movie. He's the one who asks Mary for a kiss. Fox fought him on the whole character. The studio note was that people would think that they were making fun of him. But Peter Farrelly's answer was that people with disabilities do exist, so put him on screen. Now casting him. The studio wanted a name. Chris Farley was the name that everyone circled, and the Farrellys' own argument against him was the honest one. No matter how good he was, the audience would just be watching Chris Farley. He was also, by then, uninsurable. He died on December 18th of 1997.
It will be some time before we know for sure what killed 33-year-old Chris Farley.
While they were still shooting the movie. So the comics kept coming, and at the callback there were 4 guys in the room, and W. Earl Brown was the only one who wasn't a stand-up. He could hear them through the wall, doing the voice, pushing it, trying to make Warren funny. He knew right then that all of them were wrong. He had heard about the script from Lin Shaye at the gym, and Rob Moran, who knew the Farrellys from Rhode Island, made the call to Bobby. 2 days later, he was in the room. Now here's the part that closes the circle. Back in Chicago, a decade earlier, Brown had auditioned for a permanent spot with Second City and lost it to an unknown fat kid named Chris Farley. He didn't get the job the first time either. Number 3, a dedication that almost nobody notices. You have to sit through everything to see it. All the credits, the whole cast standing in the street singing Bill Me Up Buttercup, every name in the crew, the caterers, the guy who built the prosthetic, and then, after all of it, one card, dedicated to the memory of Ryan Moan, West Tisbury, Massachusetts. Ryan Moan was 17. He played hockey, he was from Martha's Vineyard, and the Farrellys had known his family for years. He died in a car accident in 1998, about 6 months before the movie opened. So they put his name on it. All of it. The zipper, the gel, the dog, the whole beautiful mess. Most dedications go to a producer, a mentor, somebody in the business. This kid had nothing to do with the film industry. He was just somebody that they knew. And every single person who walked out during the credits missed it. Number 2, the man who sued this movie became the ShamWow guy. September 23rd, 1998. Mary is the biggest comedy in America. And a writer-director named Vince Offer sues Fox and the Farrellys for ripping off 14 scenes from his film, the underground comedy movie. Its hero is a man in a phallus costume named Dickman, who defeats his enemies by squirting them. Yeah, not kidding. Small problem. Nobody had seen the underground comedy movie. It wouldn't be released for another year. The Farrellys were in Europe and didn't even know that they had been sued. When they found out, their official statement was that they had never heard of him. They had never heard of his movie, and the whole thing was just a bunch of baloney. And then they added that they'd wished he'd go break into David Letterman's house and leave them alone. Offer, meanwhile, had already written a message into his own film's credits. Not a joke, a demand. Give me back the promotional copy of my movie that you got in 1997. You've used enough of it already. He put that on screen before a judge had heard a word. The judge dismissed it with prejudice and ordered him to pay Fox $66,000. He was bankrupt by 2002. So to dig out, he went back to doing what he had always done, selling a vegetable chopper at flea markets and swap meets. That chopper, you can guess, it's the slap chop. He had been selling that thing the whole time. He just needed to lose a lawsuit, lose a movie, and lose everything he had before somebody pointed a camera at him doing it. And number 1, the joke that followed Peter Farrelly for 20 years. January 2019. Peter Farrelly is holding a Golden Globe, not for a comedy about a dog getting launched out of a window, but for Green Book, a prestige drama about a black concert pianist touring the segregated South. 3 Globes, including Best Picture. He is, at that moment, 3 weeks from an Oscar. But then a magazine called The Cut goes into the archives. What they found was a 1998 Newsweek profile of the Farrellys, published while Mary was becoming the biggest comedy in America. Peter's bit, the one that he told a reporter he had done easily 500 times, was exposing himself. Bobby was the straight man. He'd set it up. He'd tell you that Pete had bought some ridiculous belt buckle or point out a strange mark on his brother's torso, which gets you to look down. So cast, crew, a senior executive at Fox, even Cameron Diaz in a restaurant before she had signed on to the film. Farrelly told a second reporter that year that The Flash is precisely what got her to say yes. Now here's what makes 2019 a lot different from 1998. None of this was hidden. He said it out loud, on the record, to 2 magazines, while the movie was in theaters. Newsweek printed it as color. Diaz laughed it off in her own quotes. Nobody involved thought it was a story. But 20 years later, it was the only story. Farrelly's statement was 4 sentences. He was an idiot. He thought it was funny. It makes him cringe now. He's deeply sorry. 6 weeks after that, Green Book won Best Picture. The gag didn't change. The audience, it did. And there you have it, everyone. 15 weird facts about There's Something About Mary. Which one hit hardest for you? Tell us in the comments. And subscribe right now and send this to the one friend who still swears it's just styling gel. Until next time, how'd you get the beans above the frank? This is Remember When.